you're freezing. But now you're moving. We can hear you and we can see you.
Yeah, and
But
then
for a minute there,
froze.
you
Glenn
left
and
us.
Bridget froze. So something's. I
All
want
right,
more
I think we're good.
time.
Now,
Shalom Aleichem, everybody. My name is Rabbi Joey. You've made it to the Yoke of Messiah YouTube channel. This is for our abbreviated Parsha study for Parsha Miketz, and we are going to be kicking things off with the Torah blessing. Here we go. Baruch Adonai Hamborach.
Baruch Adonai habarak le'elam
Bayed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher barakah banu mikol ha'amim banata lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is to be blessed.
Bless the Lord is to be
Bless the
blessed
Lord,
forever
who's
and
to be
ever.
blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Amen.
So, starting off, it's for Parsha Miketz, and it starts in Genesis chapter 41, verse 1. Would anybody like to start us off?
Bridget will do it.
All right, let's have at it.
All right. I didn't know I was going to start off. Genesis 41, verse 1. It came to pass at the end of 2 full years that Pharaoh was dreaming, and behold, he was standing by the Nile. And behold, from the Nile were coming up 7 cows of handsome appearance and robust flesh, and they pastured in the marshland. And behold, 7 other cows were coming up after them from the Nile, of ugly appearance and lean of flesh, and they stood beside the cows which were on the Nile bank. And the cows of ugly appearance and lean of flesh devoured the 7 cows that were of handsome appearance and healthy. Then Pharaoh awoke, and he fell asleep and dreamed again. And behold, 7 ears of grain were growing on one stalk, healthy and good. And behold, 7 ears of grain, thin and beaten by the east wind, were growing up after them. And the thin ears of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy and full ears of grain. Then Pharaoh awoke, and behold, a dream. And now it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. So he sent and called all the necromancers of Egypt and all its sages, and Pharaoh related to them his dream, but no one, interpreted them for Pharaoh. Now the chief cupbearer spoke with Pharaoh, saying, I call to mind my faults today. Pharaoh was angry with his servants, and he put me in prison and in the house of the chief slaughterer, me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream on the same night, and I and he, each one according to the interpretation of his dream. We dreamed. And there was us with a Hebrew lad, a slave of the chief slaughterer, and we told him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. For each of us he interpreted according to his dream. And it came to pass that just as he had interpreted, so it was. Me he restored to my position, and him he hanged. So Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they rushed him from the dungeon, and he shaved and changed his clothes, and then came to Pharaoh.
Amen. Thank goodness for the Spirit of God uh, jogging the memories of people.
Right. Yeah. I think this Parsha just reminds me that not every one of our dreams is important. Like Scrooge says, it could always be a piece of underdone potato. But I think it's important that if God gives us something and we know in our spirit when we wake up that we may not have the interpretation at the time, but within time, we should, wait and see if that comes to pass, or share it with somebody who does delve in that arena of the spirit, understanding dreams and things like that.
Absolutely. And again, Hashem doing something, more than once to confirm that he plans to truly do the thing. Not that we need multiple appearances of any promise from the scriptures, because they are from him, and if he says it once, it's done. But if he reveals a thing to a person, maybe in a private prophetic way, whether a dream or a word of prophecy, then we can know for sure if God is speaking and he says it, he confirms him on himself, more than once.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Does anybody know if there's any importance of the idea that the prison is located in the house of the chief slaughterer? No puns intended. But I'm assuming the chief slaughterer he means by like cattle and not people folk. So does maybe he just had the biggest basement?
Mhm.
Maybe he had stalls, for the animals for waiting, capsules as it were.
Well, there was a baker in there too. I just thought it was a communal prison. Never
Right.
considered anybody anywhere in particular. Because there was 3 different types, but there was a baker, and a butcher, and a Hebrew slave.
Right.
They're all in there.
Just interesting. And that he had to shave and change his clothes before he came to Pharaoh.
Mhm. Yeah.
Of course, we're dealing with the people who look upon Pharaoh as a god. And it reminds me, that we have to, in a Torah fashion in regards to the temple, that we have to approach God, in a particular way. And that's something God's been putting on my heart lately about making sure that even if it's just private prayer, if I'm going to come to him and spend time in prayer, if I really want to hear from him, that I need to make sure I'm jump through a couple of hoops that he's spoken to my heart about, that he's drawn out of the scriptures and said, you need to make sure this and this, if you want to make sure that you're approaching me correctly. So I've done that, and my times of prayer have been very fruitful as of late.
I think it's interesting that this significant in the verse 6, it talks about the east wind. They were beaten by the east wind. And I think we see the east pop up a lot of times in scripture, and that's that would be they're in Egypt, so the east wind would be coming from
From
Israel, that way, right?
Egypt would be south of Israel, unless I'm mistaken. My geography is bad, and I don't claim for it.
I think you're right.
I'm not sure which place is just east of Egypt, but let's look at it.
Turkey, maybe.
Saudi Arabia and Jordan.
Yeah.
And to be sure, Egypt is west, like southwest of Israel. So that could be considered, depending on how you call it.
Later, you find that the east, it also affects Israel.
Right.
And that's why they go down. The east, I thought a lot of times referred to like the land of like Ishmael and Esau and like Edom and all that.
It definitely could. Jordan and Saudi Arabia are to the east of both Israel and Egypt. And those would be definitely lands where you would have a lot of Ishmaelites. Or Arabia, as this ancient Egypt map that I'm looking at says. So that would definitely be that. We know this, of course, is a naturally occurring thing that, what do you call, famine, comes in this case. So would anybody like to read Aliyah 2?
Oh, is it?
All right. I'm sorry, did you say you did, Becky?
I will, yes.
Okay.
I said, how long is it?
Oh,
Joey,
it is
I got it.
23 verses long.
I think I can probably handle it.
All right. Let's
Okay, Genesis chapter 41, beginning in verse 15. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter for it, but I have heard it. I feel like I'm rereading something, is why I had to check. Am I correct? But I have heard it said of you that you understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph replied to Pharaoh, saying, not I. God will give an answer that will bring peace to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, behold, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, and behold, 7 cows of robust flesh and handsome form were ascending from the Nile, and they pastured in the marshland. And behold, 7 other cows were ascending after them, emaciated, and of very ugly form and with meager flesh. I have not seen such ugly ones throughout the entire land of Egypt. And the meager and ugly cows devoured the first 7 healthy cows, and they went inside them, but it was not known that they had gone inside of them, for their appearance was as ugly as in the beginning. Then I awoke. Then I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears of grain were growing on one stalk, full and good. And behold, 7 ears of grain, hardened, thin, and beaten by the east wind, were growing up after them. And the thin ears of grain swallowed up the 7 good ears of grain. I told the necromancers, but no one tells me its meaning. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's dream is one. What God is doing, he has told Pharaoh. And the 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears of grain are 7 years. It is one dream. And the 7 meager and ugly cows coming up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears of grain beaten by the east wind will be 7 years of famine. It is this matter that I have spoken to Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he has shown Pharaoh. Behold, 7 years are coming, great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And 7 years of famine will arise after them, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine will destroy the land. And the plenty will not be known because of that famine to follow, for it will be very severe. And concerning the repetition of the dream to Pharaoh twice, that is because the matter is ready to emanate from God, and God is hastening to execute it. So now let Pharaoh seek out an understanding and wise man and appoint him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh do this and appoint officials over the land and prepare the land of Egypt during the 7 years of plenty. And let them collect all the food of these coming good years, and let them gather the grain under Pharaoh's hand, food in the cities, and keep it. Thus the food will remain as a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine which will be in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not be destroyed by the famine. The matter pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. So Pharaoh said to his servants, will we find anyone like this, a man in whom there is the Spirit of God?
Wow.
It does sound like the same, it's the same recounting, as the first section.
Right.
And it does specify that the east wind was not a good thing, in this dream, whatever that east wind represented.
Right. I had never thought about it until now this year, but it occurred to me that the dream, it is the same dream, but it almost is saying that, both hunters and gatherers would be affected equally. Hunters being animal folk and, that get animals or, whatever. And gatherers, people who either gather, vegetation or subsist on vegetation, that both these groups, it wasn't just going to attack the animals, and it wasn't just going to be the locust coming in and eating the grain, but both. I mean, that's terrifying. I'm ever since, for some reason, I don't know why, my favorite food to eat went missing at the beginning of COVID, and then it came back after about 2 months, and I've not had problems finding it once until the last 2 weeks, since COVID numbers have been going exponentially through the roof. It seems like in our country, all of a sudden I can't find my favorite food again anymore. So, and I've looked at multiple stores, and it's not anything exotic. It is butter beans by Bush Beans. I should add there will be a paid advertisement in this episode. But so if anybody's in the Birmingham, Alabama area, lay off the Bush Beans for a second. Some of us out here have run dry. But yeah, so
I think we just had a can of them the other day. Should I check the stash
you
and see if
should.
there's more?
My kingdom for cans of Bush Beans.
Okay.
But as much of just an inconvenience as that was, like thinking about not being able to find any food in the land, of any substance, that's terrifying,
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's still stuff that just are, creature comforts and conveniences being not available to us is agitating enough. Not being able to find enough Lysol, not being able to find, things like that. And of course, the beginning of COVID, not being able to find the toilet paper or whatever. Just that stuff is agitating. So I can't imagine the terror that comes from all the food being gone. And we know that even though they do store up a lot during the 7 years of plenty, they do run out. It's running thin towards the end of the years of plenty, or the years of lean.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently they did not produce double in the 7 years. It sounds like maybe they produced, an extra 50% or so.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they produce an extra 75%, you got a 7-year lean on the back end of 7 years of gain. That means those last 2 years are going to be tight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. And I never considered it was animal and produce.
Yeah, that only occurred to me this year.
I never had, well, it occurred to me tonight.
Well, you think, well, if animals get diseased or something happens, God forbid, you can always fall back on the other, or really either which way,
Yeah.
Well, their food went scarce also
Right.
that they eat.
Yeah.
Right.
Actually, yeah, now that you mention it, what is it? Not horses, the cows are supposed to eat the grain. And if there's no grain, then the cattle's gonna not, will disappear shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I guess they eat grass. I guess cows eat grass. So,
Yeah.
but either which way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting.
or they're supposed to eat grass anyways. Let's see.
Okay.
And do we, other than the east wind, do we have any idea or any knowledge as to why there was a famine? Was there some disease or lack of rain or whatever? They may say it in the next alia over. I don't know. I just can't remember what, other than just saying this mysterious east wind.
I don't know that it ever says it, but it was a foretelling, for the Pharaoh to know this so that he could prepare, get Joseph. Joseph was in place to be prepared to handle this crisis.
All right, so it says in 2700, this is egypttoday.com. That 2700 BC or BCE, depending on how you refer to it, led to a shortage of the Nile flood, led to a 7-year famine, leaving Egypt in a state of extreme distress. And that would be roundabouts this time, I would imagine.
Yeah, doesn't the Nile have to flood to cause that to be a prosperous area when it rains and everything? Then the Nile floods over,
I
and
think so. It's like it floods the delta areas around the flood to make the soil rich with
yeah.
deposits. If Wikipedia is to be believed, it is also saying the same thing. It was called Famine Stella, I guess, and when they went and named back those things, was the Famine Stella was inscribed into a natural granite block whose surface was cut into a rectangular shape. The inscription is written in the hieroglyphs and contains 42 columns. The top part of the stele depicts 3 Egyptian deities whose names shall go unmentioned. In front of them, Djoser, Djoser, faces them. I think that is the name of this king at that time, carrying offerings outstretched in hands. A broad fissure, which already was there at the time of creating the stela, goes through the middle of the rock. Some sections of the stela are damaged, masking a few passages of the text. And the story is in the 18th year of this particular pharaoh. The text describes that the king is upset and worried that the land has been in the grip of a drought and famine for 7 years, during which time the Nile has not flooded into the farmlands. At the time of the translation of that stela, I guess, it was thought that the story of the 7-year famine was connected to the biblical story of Genesis 41, where a famine of 7 years occurs. And it goes on to give differing bits of information about that. But very interesting. And just the idea that, God and his work are irresistible to a degree. You can have a place where the king is considered a god and he is part of the pantheon of gods. But this kid, 30-year-old kid, shows up and interprets these dreams, or God gives him the interpretation. He gives the credit to God, which is also important. That even in this pantheon of gods, that God shows up and shows out, and it's irresistible to see the hand of God on this young man's life.
Mm-hmm.
Did anybody want to read Isaiah 3? It is also in the 15 verse range. I'm happy to read it if nobody else wants to. I will take that as a resounding yes. Genesis 41, verse 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has let you know all this, there is no one as understanding and wise as you. You shall be appointed over my household, and through your command all my peoples shall be nourished. Only with the throne shall I be greater than you. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, look, I have appointed you over the entire land of Egypt. And Pharaoh removed his ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's hand. And he attired him with raiment of fine linen, and he placed the golden chain around his neck. And he had him ride in his chariot of second rank, and they called out before him, "This is the king's patron," appointing him over the entire land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and besides you, no one may lift his hand or his foot in the entire land of Egypt." And Pharaoh named Joseph Zaphnath, thank you, Paneah. And he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the governor of On, for a wife. And Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt. And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from before Pharaoh and passed the entire land of Egypt. And in the 7 years of plenty, the inhabitants of the land gathered food by the handfuls. And he collected all the food of the 7 years that was in the land of Egypt. And he placed food in the cities, and the food of the field surrounded the city. He put within it. And Joseph gathered the grain like the sand of the sea in great abundance until one stopped counting, because there was no number. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the year of famine set in, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the governor of On, bore to him. And Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, for God has caused me to forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the second one he named Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. Very interesting. I thought those were kind of the naming Manasseh for that reason. I almost kind of felt like there was a little bit of, he's been a little stiff there. Saying that he's forgotten all of his toil and all of his father's house. And
Yeah.
he's kind of like, they sent me here, I'm turned over a new leaf, I'm doing my thing.
That's what it
Yeah.
sounds like to me too.
Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, if he's this powerful, I would assume he could either himself or by the king's permission send emissaries back home,
Yeah.
you know, and bring them on or whatever. You know, of course, I don't know if he knew if the famine was going to affect Canaan or not. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but yeah, this is something else. Be taken out of the dungeon and made the second in command over the greatest nation on earth at that time. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
with the king almost making himself subservient to Joseph in regards to his wisdom and his decision-making process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, to get be married to the wife of Potiphar, I mean to the daughter of Potiphar, you know. And
Mhm. Yeah, that's an interesting thing here.
mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's so many correlations between him and Yeshua. You know, there's so many similarities in the stories and the numbers and everything, and what he had done.
Joey, your head just keeps getting bigger and bigger and
I
throughout
don't
this.
know what you're talking about. Bigger and bigger and bigger.
The big head.
Sorry, I
the
always
big-
lean in when I have to read, and then I realize like I'm
Yeah. I
like
can
the
think it. This
mime
whole thing is
cartoon with this
growing. You know?
bulbous head.
Ah,
I try to make it to where I'm kind of in frame at the beginning, then I like I'm tired, so I guess I'm leaning in. But let's see. And so here we have it. these kids end up getting adopted, you know,
Mhm.
um, by Jacob ultimately to be a double portion for Joseph.
Mhm.
But it also makes me wonder. I was just having this discussion with somebody recently, and I can't remember what we came to. Of the sons of Noah, did Shem inhabit this land? I thought that the continent of Africa was given to the sons of uh, uh, Ham. Does anybody remember that? Let's see. Which son of Noah received Africa? Ham.
Yeah.
According to the table of nations in the book of Genesis, was the second son of Noah and the father of Cush, Mitzrayim, Phut, and Canaan. Ham's descendants were interpreted by Flavius Josephus and others as having populated Africa and adjoining parts of Asia. So therefore, it could be argued, and I've heard it argued before, that the Pharaoh at this time was a Semite, but we don't have any record here to say Potiphar's daughter would have been a Semite. She would likely have been a Hamite, I would imagine. Um, Therefore, these kids, uh, I know what the sages say, but just reading it flat for ourselves, is there some supposition to understand that Manasseh and Ephraim are actually uh, Semitic through their father's lineage, but not necessarily their mother's. But then they become adopted and by Jacob Israel and become Israelites, Semitic, as it were.
Mhm. Mhm.
Does anybody have any thoughts about that or anything? I'm not trying to be salacious here.
I always assumed that his children were like half breeds.
Right.
And that's just, I mean, I could be, I'm not saying I'm right about it. I'm just saying I always thought it was just in another reference to being like the Messiah, like all his children are probably pretty much half breeds. You know, we're all probably more than half, but,
Yeah.
you
If you're
know,
American, you're probably Hans 57, as they say.
but when you come into adoption, like, uh, you know, Joseph's sons were, then they become the sons of Israel, just like through the adoption of the Messiah, you know, uh, we become the sons of Israel also. That's just kind of the way I've always seen it.
I feel that. Well, did anybody have any other thoughts about Alia 3 before we move on?
Mm.
All right. Would anybody want to read Alia 4?
I will.
All right.
All right. Um, Genesis chapter 41, verse 53. And the 7 years of plenty that were in the land of Egypt were finished. And the 7 years of famine began, as Joseph had said, and there was famine in all the lands, that throughout the land of Egypt there was bread. When the entire land of Egypt hungered, the people cried out to Pharaoh for bread. But Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, Go to Joseph. Go to Joseph. What he tells you, do. What he tells you, do. And the famine spread over all the face of the land, and Joseph opened all the storehouses in which there was grain, and he sold it to the Egyptians. And the famine intensified in the land of Egypt. And all the inhabitants of the land of Egypt to Joseph to purchase, for the famine had intensified in the entire land. Jacob saw that there was grain being sold in Egypt, so Jacob said to his sons, Why do you appear satiated? And he said, Behold, I have heard that there is grain being sold in Egypt. Go down there and buy us some from there, so that we will live and not die. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Joseph's brother Benjamin Jacob did not sin with his brothers because he said, less misfortune before him. So the sons of Israel came to purchase among those who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was the ruler over the land. It was he who sold grain to the entire populace of the land, and Joseph's brothers came and prostrated themselves to him with their faces to the ground. And Joseph saw his brothers, and he recognized them, but he made himself a stranger to them, and he spoke to them harshly, and he said to them, where do you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan to purchase food. Now Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed about them. And he said to them, you are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said to him, no, my master, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest. Your servants were never spies. But he said to them, no, but you have come to see the nakedness of the land. And they said, we, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Egypt, in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is with our father today, and one is gone. And Joseph said to them, this is just what I have spoken to you, saying, you are spies. With this you shall be tested. By Pharaoh's life, you shall not leave this place until your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you and let him fetch your brother, and you will be in prison so that your words will be tested, whether truth is in you, and if not, as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. And he put them in prison for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, do this and live. I fear God.
Wow. There's a lot of moving parts in there.
Mm-hmm.
So is it weird? I'm not trying to get into some weird, this is a politics-free YouTube channel, but is it weird, and I'm not trying to make any kind of correlations to anything of modern day, but the food was the people's and they gave it to Joseph, and then Joseph charged them upon doling it back out. Wouldn't it be more correct to just be like, how many people in your household? And somebody says 5, and they're like, okay, well, here's, whatever the amount of grain for 5 people would be. I don't know. I've never made bread. So, anyways, I just thought it's kind of weird. They're buying
They're
back
buying
stuff.
back their own food.
Yeah. Even if it was a matter of, well, not necessarily everybody were farmers that grew food or whatever. Now, maybe that's something to try and make sure that, whatever. But I don't know. It just seemed weird to me that he sold it back to him. And we know that this gets even more extreme in the coming Alia. But anyways, I don't know. That was just weird to me.
Maybe it was a protectionary or protective something. If they buy it, if they pay for it, they will buy what they need and ration it appropriately,
Right.
rather than if you are given it, it's a little different.
Right.
Okay, I get that.
You could
Yeah.
you could correlate the price being paid to the number of heads in the house or whatever.
Right, right,
That could be a way to try and keep honest.
right. You're not going to go overboard. It's going to be parceled out correctly because you have to pay for it, and you're going to parcel it out in the home because it's costly, So in that way, that ensures against wastefulness. I mean, I don't know.
Or hoarding.
Or hoarding.
Yeah, the hoarding thing as well. That's been this year's taught us a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
Talk about that. It was important.
Toilet paper.
Not all of us have today.
Hey, I was gonna say, let the record reflect that toilet paper is not a problem amongst those who believe in bidets. So, word to the wise. We have saved a ton of money on toilet paper this year. Just, I'll have you know. So, let's see.
But it seems to me like if there was a famine in the land, And evidently the cows and everything died. I mean, all the livestock must have,
Seems like there was
because
death because it says all they're eating is bread.
right, because he's only dealing with the grain.
Right.
You know, so I guess everybody turned into vegetarians, huh?
How long can grain be stored? This is interesting. Ooh, this is scary. It says here that grain can be stored in a silo for 18 months. Let's see. So that's not long. I don't know anything about food storage either. I've not made food nor have I stored it except for in cans. So
Yeah.
so I don't know what would go into that.
Yeah.
I wonder if God supernaturally um,
Yeah.
preserved that because of their effort. They were operating off of his foretelling.
Hmm.
Maybe that God prospered it in such a way as to protect it. I mean, it didn't say so in scripture, to my knowledge, but maybe it could be. Do you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Uh-huh. And maybe back then they knew how to preserve foods. They knew how to
There may be
preserve
something
bodies.
going on.
Hey, they're preserving bodies, yeah. So
Yeah.
Yeah. And their silos back then are not our silos today.
Right.
right.
You would think our silos would be more sophisticated. But I grew up with many silos that all they were metal round cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing
Well, if they did it,
I can remember anything special.
yeah, maybe if they did it like we know they have the technology for the pyramids, and I think a lot of that they were trying to preserve in the pyramids are actually underground or below surface level,
Right.
where it's like, what is it, 55 degrees underground at all times or something crazy like that. So maybe it's acts as a refrigerant or a coolant or something like that. So maybe they buried it, to some
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be a lot of different things.
Moisture, that would be taken into consideration too.
True.
No telling.
Yeah.
It was
Charge all this. Mm-hmm.
It may just be, I'm plugging in powers before we lose the power on this thing. It's
Okay.
interesting. It may be that when we do the things that God tells us to do, even in strange occurrences like this,
Right.
that he has already ordained that that's going to work out,
Yes.
be preserved, or be this or be that, because we're operating on his scheme, which takes it out of man. In other words, in so doing, we become laborers together with God, but God is the one that is underwriting this entire process. I'm just saying whether that was what happened in this scenario or not, I think it's still truth and we'll preach.
Yeah, well, that's like Noah's Ark. All those animals were in there, but they weren't eating each other.
Right.
They weren't fighting.
Right.
And
Exactly.
stuff like that. And I think they were in a hibernated state myself, but
Agreed.
not all animals hibernate either, and I mean, those are logistical questions too, so
True.
I think these are miracles.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, did you have any thoughts? Well, I totally overlooked you last week. I realized after it was all over. So, Ben, I'm looping you in, buddy, if you had anything you wanted to share with the class.
I was Googling root cellars. So
Why'd you say?
Okay.
Food sellers?
I was Googling root cellars to see if grain lasts longer in, the old fashioned where you just basically dug up under your house so deep, and you.
That's cool.
But I didn't see anything that jumped out. It did say nuts and grain store really well in that, but I didn't get down to specifics before you
And
asked me what I knew, because I don't know anything
um,
without googling when it comes to what you're talking about now.
so technically, the oldest grain when the famine started, the oldest grain would be 7 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you would think that they would use that wouldn't work. Still all going to be if they use the oldest grain that they stored first, it would turn over every. The last year would still be 7 years old,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
The
So
math major I am not.
this is not a one for one, but I just read a funny quote. I did Grain Seller, and there is a website for those interested calling. It's for a company in Houston, Texas, called the Grain Seller. And it said, worst case scenario, talking about grain that's been stored in a cellar. Worst case scenario, you'll have beer. Best case scenario, you'll have great beer. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that was funny.
All righty then.
All right, all right, all right.
Okay.
Not to lose the lead on this other, where Joseph throws his brothers in jail for 3 days. That's pretty intense. Other than the Messiah connection, spoiler alert, everybody, we believe Yeshua is the Messiah on this YouTube page. So if you haven't picked up on that by now, if you need to go, we understand, and we'd love to have you back sometime. Um, uh, Other than the Messiah connection of, being imprisoned for 3 days and then on the third day being brought out of the earth, out of captivity. I can't see Joseph wasn't in the hole in the ground for 3 days, was he?
When he was in prison?
Yeah. I mean, when he was
When his brothers put him there.
threw him in the hole.
I don't think he said.
I don't remember.
It seemed like it might have been a day or so, but either
That's
way,
what
he certainly spent enough time in captivity, much longer than 3 days. So
Mm-hmm.
But just by saying the 3 days, I think it is a messianic reference, period.
agreed.
And of course,
Yeah.
that they deserved it, as so do we.
Yeah.
Right.
And yet, we'll see that they're taken out, and so are we, and yet did not do a thing to deserve it.
That's, in this case, it's literally the grace of Joseph making
Right.
it only 3 days. It could have been, who knows?
Right.
And when he put them in there, even though they didn't see it, they weren't put in there with Joseph's intent of something evil, like him planning on doing evil to them.
Right.
Right.
Whereas when he was, put away, it was, they were
Right.
doing specific. So even though they were probably really really scared, he was just using that to his advantage. I don't read anything that he meant them harm in any of this.
Right.
And even though we didn't talk an awful lot about this, but like the baker,
Mhm.
Cupbearer and
the cupbearer,
the
was there a 3-day scenario
yeah, I think.
with them?
Uh-huh.
In other words, one was saved
Right.
and one went to death.
Right.
That to me is a heaven and hell reference, actually. Because there is a literal ending, there is a literal hell, there's a literal heaven.
Right.
I don't know. Just so many things are in it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Mhm.
Let's see. Well, I gotta see how this story ends. Does anybody want to read Aliyah 5?
I can do it.
All right.
Genesis 42, chapter 19. If you are honest, your one brother will be confined in your prison, and you go bring the grain for the hunger of your households. And bring your youngest brother to me so that your words may be verified and you will not die. And they did so. And they said to one another, indeed, we are guilty for our brother that we witnessed the distress of his soul when he begged us. And we did not listen. That is why this trouble has come upon us. And Reuben answered them, saying, didn't I tell you, saying, do not sin against the lad? But you did not listen. Behold, his blood too is being demanded. They did not know that Joseph understood, for the interpreter was between them. And he turned away from them and wept, then returned to them and spoke to them. And he took Simeon from them among them and imprisoned him before their eyes. And Joseph commanded, and they filled their vessels with grain. And he commanded to return their money into each one's sack and to give them provisions for the journey. And he did so for them. And they loaded their grain upon their donkeys, and they went away from there. The one opened his sack to give fodder to his donkey at the lodging place and saw his money there. There it was in the mouth of the sack. And he said to his brothers, my money has been returned, and indeed here it is in my sack. Their hearts sank, and trembling they turned to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? And they came to Jacob their father to the land of Canaan, and they told him all that had befallen them, saying, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke to us harshly, and he accused us of spying on the land. And we said to him, we are honest, we were never spies. We are 12 brothers, the sons of our father. One is gone, and today the youngest is with our father in the land of Canaan. And the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, with this I will know that you are honest. Leave one of your brothers with me, and what is needed for the hunger of your households, take and go. And bring your youngest brother to me, so that I will know that you are not spies, that you are honest. Then I will give you your brother, and you may travel around in the land. And it came to pass that they were emptying their sacks, and behold, each one's bundle of money was in his sack. They saw the bundles of their money, they and their father, and they became frightened. And their father Jacob said to them, you have bereaved me. Joseph is gone, and Simeon is gone, and you want to take Benjamin. All these troubles have come upon me. And Reuben spoke to his father, saying, you may put my 2 sons to death if I don't bring him Benjamin to you. Put him in my hands, and I will return him to you. But he, Jacob, said, my son shall not go down with you, because his brother is dead, and he alone is left. And if misfortune befalls him on the way you are going, you will bring down my gray head in sorrow to the grave. Genesis chapter 43. But the hunger was severe in the land, and it came to pass, when they finished eating the grain that they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, go back and buy us a little food. But Judah spoke to him, saying, the man warned us repeatedly, saying, you shall not see my face if your brother is not with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you do not send him, we will not go down, because the man said to us, you shall not see my face if your brother is not with you. And Israel said, why have you harmed me by telling the man that you have another brother? They said, the man asked about us and about our family, saying, is your father still alive? Do you have a brother? And we told him according to these words. Could we have known that he would say, bring your brother down? And Judah said to Israel, his father, send the lad with me, and we will get up and go, and we will live and not die, both we and you, and also our young children. I will guarantee him from my hand, you can demand him. If I do not bring him to you and stand him up before you, I will have sinned against you forever. For had we not tarried, by now we would have already returned twice. So Israel, their father, said to them, if so, then do this. Take some of the choice products of the land in your vessels, and take down to the man as a gift a little balm and a little honey, wax and lotus, pistachios and almonds. And take double the money in your hands, and the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks you shall return in your hands. Perhaps it was an error. And take your brother and get up and go back to the man. And may the Almighty God grant you compassion before the man, and he will release to you your other brother and Benjamin. As for me, as I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So the men took this gift, and they took double the money in their hands and Benjamin, and they got up and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph.
Scary. I feel so bad for Jacob in this Parsha, in this Aliyah.
It's interesting that in verse 6 of that last chapter we were reading, he goes from being Jacob to being Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's significant. I couldn't say why, but I know it's got to be significant. It's, you know.
Well, it's the prophecy or God saying from here on you're going to be.
Right.
That's a prophetic thing, and what that name means. And this is God's working on the fulfillment of it right there.
Yeah.
Because this is about to actually happen. He's going to end up. Jacob is the father of Joseph. Joseph is the father of Egypt in this scenario, and he's bringing it all into a big scope.
Put the family back together again.
Right. And in essence, Joseph represents another nation at this point. He's part of another nation. He's been adopted into them, right? And in their customs, he brings
assimilated.
He's assimilated, and he brings all of that with him. Well, he's actually more than assimilated. He has blood that has come from him that is now formed from that nation.
Right.
You know.
That's true.
So now he is going to be Israel, the father of many nations, you know.
That's interesting.
So the distance between Canaan and Egypt. Let's see. If there's a straight line, that's roughly 600 meters, which is, that seems a lot. 5,000 miles. Distance between Egypt and Canaan.
It's a trip. And that I noticed in the last Parsha that they had to feed.
5,000.
I don't think it's that doesn't sound right.
That would
Let's
be,
Google map it.
that
But-
can't be.
But I noticed in the last Parsha that on their way back, when they opened the brother opened his sack and found the money, he was going to have to give some of that precious grain that they had gotten in Egypt to his donkey,
Right.
you know, to get him back home. You know, it's like putting gas in your car.
Let's just say Cairo.
All right.
And then let's do directions from, I don't know where in Israel they are. We'll just say Jerusalem to pick it.
Canaan land.
He can
And if
add
you're traveling by feet, okay, so I don't know what that was that I was looking at. It's 148-hour trip.
By feet.
by walking.
You walking,
foot.
you mean
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
6 days, a little more, 6 or 7 days?
Even that's possible.
Yeah, let's say you just
It's a week.
travel 12 hours a day. That's a 10-day trip somewhere.
It's 15-ish.
Right. So let's say 15, and because I was trying to figure out how long they left Simeon there.
30 days by that, right?
Yeah, because it said if we had left it, we could
Or
have gone and
60
come. Yeah, I think it would be 60 because we're
round
talking
trip
about 15,
twice.
15, 15, 15.
Yeah.
So they left Simeon there for a couple months.
Well, they used
Um,
up almost all the grain that they had brought back.
right. So let's just tack on another month. I don't know how much grain they had. So they left Simeon there. Let's just say worst case or least case scenario, 3 months. So my whole thing is knowing me, I would have at least been like, okay, we're gonna keep Simeon away from these guys when they come back, but I'm gonna go ahead and like reveal myself to Simeon, and we can like hang out and be bros and all that. Like that would be hard to know that you had your own brother in prison all this time while your other brothers are having to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and wrestle all this situation with your dad. Um, but that seems pretty intense.
It might have been a really nice setup, though. It might not have been like, you know,
Yeah.
shackled in the dark dungeon
In
prison.
in the movie,
In the movie.
in the movie, he didn't stay in jail. He had been treated very, very well. And when the brothers came back, they were so sorrowful. And they said, no. And he said, no, no, I've been treated well.
Right. Maybe he had freedom of movement to live his life and do all that, but still to be, oh my gosh, I can't imagine being away from my kids for 3 months. That's crazy. But anywho, so that's where he was and what was going on. Mm,
It was kind of, where was it? Oh no, I lost it. Where they're trying to convince Jacob to give them.
so what now?
Where they're trying to convince Jacob to let him take Benjamin.
Yeah, he didn't want to let him go. And he got mad at him for saying, why did you even tell him you had a brother that wasn't with you? And it's like, well, how are we? And I totally see their point. They're like, well, how are we supposed to know he's going to demand that we're going to bring our brother back? You know,
Well,
with us.
if you go back to the conversation, all Joseph says is that you're spies. He
Right.
never in that part says, "Do you have a dad? Do you have other brothers?" He never said that in the part that we read. Now maybe he did say that.
It doesn't say that he asked them, but it does say that they tell him that.
Right.
Right.
So he didn't directly ask them that. They gave that
Mhm.
up, trying to defend them. Oh no, we're not spies. We're just like 12 brothers and this one guy, and you
Mhm.
know, to start word vomiting. Oh, here it is, verse 38. My son shall not go down with you because his brother is dead, and he alone is left. And if misfortune befalls him on the way you're going, you will bring down my gray head in sorrow to the grave. So it's almost like he thinks that what happened to Joseph, because they brought back the bloody um,
Bloody coat.
the bloody coat. Oh, he's attacked by. And we're on this trip. And it's out there in the wilderness. And it's dangerous. And he's a little boy, whatever, and or younger, and the bear got him or whatever. So he's got that in his brain. Is what happened to Joseph. I assume, unless they ever told him before now that that was just whatever.
Right.
So he's got the same idea when actually who he should have been afraid of is not the bears, but his own sons.
That's right.
Right. Well, as you'll be reminded sometimes when watching different things, there was some movie we watched. It's kind of a documentary or something a few years ago, and it was talking about all these crazy predatorial animals. And at the beginning and end of the documentary, it said, well, but these are all terrifying facts, but do remember that the most dangerous you know creature on earth is man. So
Rawr.
man bear. Um,
Until they
so
teach the apes to ride horses and use weapons, that'll be true, right?
All right. Well, we're going to cut it off here, but something just popped in my head I've never considered before, and I'm going to leave it out there for food for thought. And if anybody has any ideas about it, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But I feel like this is an interesting spot to stop off at as food for thought, that Joseph is accusing his 10 brothers of being spies. He accuses them that 2 or 3 times about coming to spy out the nakedness of the land. And then on the conquest of Canaan, when Israel leaves Egypt and ends up going back to the Eretz, or what will come the Eretz, Canaan, they send 10 spies into the land to spy out the land to see its fullness, or to see if it, if they could take it or whatever. And I don't know. There's some connective tissue there. Someone much smarter than me can, if anybody has any thoughts, or if anybody wants to post about it that's watching this, we would love to have your thoughts on it. There's got to be something there. 2 or 3 times accusing his 10 brothers of spies, and going further, that the spies were taken from each of the 10 tribes to spy out the Eretz when they go back to Canaan, and these are the fathers of those sons, those children that would be spies later on. So just interesting how that dovetails with the story, the Torah even dovetailing with itself. Did anybody have any thoughts about that? No pressure, because I don't have any ideas how to tie those 2 ideas together.
I'd never considered it, but it's very interesting.
It is.
It was 12 spies, right, that was sent, and 10 of them said, yeah, we can't do this, and 2 of them said, yeah, we can do this if God's
Yeah,
with
you're
us.
right. You're right. I'm sorry.
And it was Caleb and Joshua that
There
said
were
we can do
10
this.
10
10
bad actors.
10 naysayers.
Right. 10
we
bad
can't do
actors.
this.
And 2 good ones and or innocent ones, as it were. So really, yeah, that's incredible. Now I know that I can't speak for the other who Caleb was representing, but not Caleb. Caleb represented Judah in the spies, but I don't know who is the other old guy.
Joshua, son of Nun.
Yeah, Joshua. Thank you. Those 2 come back, and I don't know who Joshua represents in that. I'm sure we could do a little homework on it, but those 2, at least we have in that story the son of Judah that went into the land. His brother may have had a bad report before and been one of the bad actors in this story, talking about making teshuvah and redemption and subsequent generations getting things turned around. We see that God can do that thing moving forward in the future. So, and that each generation has an opportunity to make right and to correct the mistakes of the past, and that God's grace is sufficient for each of those generations. So, well, guys, thank y'all so much for participating. I've had a blast. And thank you, everybody out there in YouTubeville, for visiting with us. Again, we would love to hear any thoughts that you might have about anything that was said in the comments, or if you want to visit with us at facebook.com/groups/Yoke of Messiah, or if you need to reach me directly, we would love to hear from you at yokeofmessiah@gmail.com. But until next week, hope you have a wonderful holiday season. We're in the midst of Hanukkah, so we pray that you have a wonderful and blessed season of lights, festival of lights, festival of dedication. Shalom Aleichem.